Hey Ecofictologists, my name is Lovis and today we're going to take a little break from our Conservation in Ecofiction series because I had something very exciting happen to me. I had a publisher reach out and ask me to review the debut novel The Best Part of Us by Sally Cole-Misch. And even more exciting than that is that next week we will be welcoming Sally herself on the channel. She was kind enough to agree to do an interview with me and I cannot wait to hear what inspired this beautiful book. I just wanted to make clear that while I was approached and asked to do this review, my opinions are still my own and they are honest. I wouldn't swindle you guys for the sake of a free book, so treat this as if it were any of the other reviews that I've done based solely on a book's merit. The reason I have interrupted our Conservation in Ecofiction series for this is because the timing is just too perfect not to take advantage of. Because The Best Part of Us dropped only yesterday, which means it is hot off the press. Which means you can all go out and get it yourself if you like. Let's try and make this first debut week as memorable and amazing as possible for Sally. Right, with all of that out of the way, let's not wait any longer to dive into this book, The Best Part of Us by Sally Cole-Misch. A spoiler-free summary of the book. The Best Part of Us is a story of childhood memories, of love, of loss, and family secrets. Our protagonist, Beth Lindy, remembers spending the summers of her childhood in the family cabin on the Canadian Big Birch Lake, or Lake Wigwacobi, as the family prefers to call it, following the traditions of the Ojibwe people who also live on the shores of the lake. Her grandparents bought an island on the lake when they came over from Wales, and the family spends their summers there, and it is where Beth feels the most like herself, the most alive. Her love of nature, of all the birds and the beasts sharing the lake, makes this place incredibly special for her. Losing it is the worst thing she can imagine, and when the family's ownership of the island comes into question, each of their actions is going to have knock-on effects that nobody could have predicted and send ripples throughout the rest of their lives. I'm really excited to talk about this book because it's very different from any of the other books that I've reviewed on the channel. It doesn't have a climate change message or a conservation message. It's more about evoking the wonder and awe that we can find when we go out into nature. When I defined ecofiction, what seems like forever ago now, I said it was fiction where nature and our relationship with the physical environment plays a major role in the plot, and that is most definitely true for The Best Part of Us. The Canadian lake environment is almost a character in its own right because it affects the actions of all the other characters in the book. It is incorporated into the personalities of all of the characters, and it even plays a role in how they define each other, you know, what they're best at. Is it sailing? Is it fishing? Is it climbing? How comfortable and at home do they feel in nature? And what do they know about its ecology? It also features heavily in the plot, obviously, and drives a lot of it forward. By the end of the book, I was completely in love with this area. I wanted to go and see it. I wanted to see the island and swim in the lake and hear all the birds calling. It just made me so jealous that I'd never seen it. I think creating this emotional connection with nature and the great outdoors is so important. I mean, this is where it's all rooted, right? We have to care about these places and invest in their fate. I would be devastated to learn that the lake that I had read about in this book had been hit by forest fires or landslides, or the woods around it had been logged for industry. It would be heartbreaking. And before the book, it would have been sad because I understand what it means to the ecosystem. I would have been very sad, but I wouldn't have been heartbroken. And I think that's a very important difference. Something else that I thought was a really nice touch, and I don't think this counts as a spoiler because it doesn't really have anything to do with the main plot, is the fact that the main character, Beth, grows up to be a freshwater ecologist. She takes her love for this ecosystem and all she grew up learning about it, and she put it into her vocation. This makes a really good point that the experiences we have as children really shape how we think, and the lessons we are taught at that time can influence what we value later. I know it was like that for me. I fell in love with the sea from weekend trips to the coast and to the Monterey Bay Aquarium. I knew very early that I wanted to be a marine biologist. I wonder what I would have been if we hadn't gone to those places. Our connection to nature, especially when we're young, can have a profound effect later on, and I think the stories that we hear as children do too. I found this book a complete pleasure to read. Every scene describes the nature around the characters, really immersing the reader in the surroundings. There is a literary and theatre technique called Chekhovs Gun, which is that everything in a story must be necessary, and unnecessary things should be removed. The name comes from an example that if you have a gun on a mantelpiece in Act 1, that gun better go off in Act 2 or 3. If it doesn't, then it shouldn't be hanging there. It has no purpose. Similarly, you don't want to introduce a solution to a problem at the end of the story, like a deus ex machina, because it jolts the reader and it makes it seem like you haven't planned your plot properly. When these things are done right, it's very satisfying because the reader feels like they can figure things out and solutions seem plausible. And that's what I found with The Best Part of Us. Everything that's placed in this story is there for a reason, down to the calls that the birds make. Everything comes back round for a second purpose. And all the solutions to obstacles come from elements that have already been introduced. And I find that very satisfying. In the acknowledgements at the end of the book, Sally Cole-Misch writes about the emotional connection. How making the choices to restore and protect nature has to start with getting people outside to benefit from what being outdoors can give us. She says, what we value, we choose to protect. The purpose of the book was to get us to think about our unique connections that we have with others and with nature and what we are going to do to protect them. I will definitely be asking Sally more about that next week, so you can hear directly from her what inspired this book and what she hopes the reader will feel when they read it. And with that, I will leave some things for you to discover next week when I interview the author herself. I hope you've enjoyed this review of The Best Part of Us by Sally Cole-Misch as much as I enjoyed reading it. You know the drill by now. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, hit the bell, all the good stuff, and leave all of your wonderful comments down below. I'd love to hear them. And definitely pop by next week for my interview with Sally Cole-Misch. I'll see you then, Ecofictologists.